Okay. Alright. So you can try Ubuntu. Okay, you can try Ubuntu if you want, or you can actually install it on. Now trying it, which is means it's just gonna load Ubuntu from the DVD. So you're just gonna play around with Ubuntu on the actual virtual DVD. Okay. Installing it is it's gonna actually install it on the virtual hard drive. Okay, so I'm gonna click on install Ubuntu. My keyboard is US, so just be careful what keyboard you choose. If you've got a $sign on your keypad, that means it's a US keyboard, like mine. Okay, so what applications would you like to install to start with? Normal installation or minimal installation? Minimal is just web browser and basic utilities. Normal is web browser, utilities, Office software. It's similar to Microsoft Office games. Okay, so I'm going to do the normal. Alright. Other options: download updates while installing Ubuntu. This could help update drivers that you need, so always have that checked. Sorry, this is for software, updates to software. So the DVD contains software already, alright, as part of the installation. This download, that check will update the software that's on this DVD if there's updates for them. This one is for updating graphics and other hardware, okay? Always check this one, especially this one. You don't need to check that one, and I'm not going to check that one in this case because for the purposes of the course I don't want to download. So for software, I just want to download for hardware drivers. Okay, so I'm just going to do that, but you can, when you install, you can do that as well. Alright, but you have to do this one at least, and you can do one of those too. Okay, let's continue. Okay, as the same with Linux Mint, you can custom partition your Linux installation, and you do the custom partition via something else. Yeah, with the Ubuntu you can create or resize partitions yourself, okay, or choose multiple partitions for Ubuntu. This is more advanced. If you want to install Linux on your physical hard drive and you have nothing else on your physical hard drive, no other operating system, no Windows, no personal files or documents, it's a clean hard drive, you can safely choose this one and continue. It will be the easiest way to install Ubuntu, okay, especially for beginners. Same applies to installing on a virtual machine. If you install on a virtual machine, there's no risk at all to your Windows or other personal documents and files, okay? So you can safely choose this and continue. It's not going to pose any risk, zero risk to any of your personal files, okay? No need to worry. This, if you install it on a virtual machine, but if you install it on a physical hard drive, not a virtual machine, directly on your laptop or desktop computer hard drive, physical hard drive, not via this Oracle VirtualBox, then you need to be very careful. Nothing must be on that hard disk. It must be empty, none of your personal files, okay? Otherwise it will erase, as it says here. Warning. Read that warning carefully, okay? Unless you know exactly what you're doing and you're a more advanced user, I don't need to explain to you, you already know. Okay, encrypt the new Ubuntu installation for security. Always a good idea, but I would advise you to read up on it before you do that. I generally don't, unless there's a very good reason. Logical volume management is allows you to take snapshots, so if something happens with your Linux operating system, then you can just revert back to the previous snapshot, okay? Windows has a similar setup. functionality. You can also do partition resizing easier if you have this. So I would recommend checking that. Okay, but I'm not going to do it for this installation, for this course, because I'm not going to use this operating system that I install. Okay, so I'm going to do this something else, because that one is very easy. It should be very easy. It's just click, 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 click with a couple of things you need to fill in, the username, password, and stuff like that. Okay, so it's not even worth, really, it's not even worth doing a course on that. Okay, but this is the more complicated one, and this is what teaches you some very useful skills. Okay, even for beginners. So you can do both. You can try both. Okay, the easy way and a more difficult way. You can try both. Okay, create 2 virtual machines. Alright, and try and install both. So okay, so now you can go and read. I'm not going to explain in too much detail what a partition is, or partitioning of hard drives. You can go and Google and read up what partitions are. I would advise you to do that. Okay. If you have a computer or a laptop, its hard drive has got partitions. I can guarantee you that. Okay. So this, like the C drive on your Windows operating system, that's a partition on its own. Okay, on the hard drive, on the physical hard drive. Now this is a partition. It's a virtual partition on a virtual hard drive, and if I continue now without new partition table, if I just continue, I think what will it say? No root file system is defined. Okay, it's because we chose the custom one. If we went back and we chose this one, you wouldn't need to do any of this. Okay, if we just chose that one and continue, it will do it automatically. It will partition automatically. But we're going to partition manually. Alright, so there's your virtual hard disk, VirtualBox hard disk. It's a virtual hard disk, okay, of 10 gigs, and it's the partition code or name is that. Okay, or the sorry, not the partition, the main virtual hard drive. That's the code STA, device /STA. Now a partition will have a number. Okay, so STA1, STA2, those are the partitions. Okay, you have selected an entire device partition. If you proceed with creating a new partition table on device, then all current partitions will be removed. Note that you will be able to undo this operation later if you wish. Yeah, so if there's something on the hard drive and you remove all partitions, it deletes all the data. Okay, so be careful. But because this is virtual machine, it's fine, no risk. Okay, so now it's created the first table, sort of empty table for this virtual hard disk. Now we're going to create the first partition out of that empty partition table. Okay. Now, as I mentioned in the Linux Mint installation course, which I recommend you to also take, generally the minimum partition that you have to be able to install Linux is the root partition. Okay, but most of the time you need the root partition and the boot partition to be able to install Linux. Okay, there are some cases where you can just use the root partition, and that's fine, but most of the time when you do the custom partitioning, manual partitioning, you need root partition and boot partition. It's maybe also advisable to create a swap space, so in case you have low not so much RAM on your machine, then I would strongly recommend that you create swap space, which is the same size as your RAM, your physical computer memory RAM. Okay, But if you've got lots of memory memory like 16 gigs, you don't need swap space. I don't think you need swap space, okay? But you definitely need root, definitely, and then highly advisable to create a boot partition as well. The automatic installation of Linux, where you don't need to manually partition, that creates root, boot, swap. It also creates a home partition, I think. I think so, I'm not too sure. Otherwise it just creates the home partition under the root partition, okay? Anyway, so the first one we create, the most important one, which in a way is the primary partition, is the root partition. And so what size do we want that? Because this is just 10 gigs. So the root partition is where the Linux will be installed, okay? It's also where Ubuntu Linux will be installed. It is also where all the applications will be installed, okay? So it needs to be the largest of the 10 gigs, okay? The highest percentage. So I'm going to make it 8 gigs. If you've got an 80 gig hard drive, you can make the root partition 60 gigs if you want to, because your personal files, if you have the home directory inside the root directory, your personal files will also be in that 60 gigs, okay? But you can create a separate one, separate partition for the home if you want to. But okay, I'm not going to go into advanced installation of Linux or the advanced options and possibilities. This is just a more a overview of how to install Ubuntu Linux, okay? So especially for beginners, I don't want to go into too much details. So let's keep it on 8 gigs. 8000 megabytes is 8 gigs, okay? So it's root partition always ext4. It can be x3 or x2, but those are older, okay? The most modern one is x4, and that's also the best one to use, especially on more modern machines, more modern computers. So for root, x4, okay? Generating file system. Root, boot, home. That's what they look like. Home partition, boot partition, root partition, okay? There we go. Done. Now next we create the boot partition. So we click on there, click on the plus sign. Boot partition never needs to be higher than 500 megabyte, half a gig, okay? 500 megabyte is definitely enough. Half a gig, 500 megabyte. It's definitely enough. And that one is always x2. Remember, always x2, always, okay? And that's boot, okay? It's what it uses when it boots up Linux, when you boot up the computer. For it to boot the Linux bootloader, this is what it uses, okay? Alright, don't need to worry about that. It automatically takes care of that. You can manually change this, but default settings that there is okay. And just for the sake of it, I'm just gonna, I don't need to. Those two, that's compulsory, mandatory. That's most of the time compulsory and mandatory. But the swap space is not compulsory. Okay, so I'm just going to leave the swap space to 2.2 gigs, just because no specific reason, just for demonstration purposes. I can make it 500, I can make it 1000 if I wanted to. I'll just let me make it 2 gigs. Okay, and there it is, swap area. Okay, it's pretty much does the same as a RAM memory on a physical computer, but it uses the hard drive to store the data, okay? Whereas RAM doesn't use the hard drive, much quicker. Swap space is much slower, but that's just the backup in case your RAM is used up, because your PC can then completely freeze. You would need to reboot, whereas swap makes it possible to use some swap space, and then it is much slower, makes it much slower, your computer, but it doesn't freeze up. Okay, but for people with 16 gigs RAM, they don't need this. So okay, so it's very simple. Low RAM, you need swap. High RAM, like more than 8 gigs, it's like 16 gigs, you don't need swap. You do need the root partition, and you do need the boot partition. Okay, boot partition, only that size, 500 megabyte. This partition size, any size you want. Okay, any size. I would recommend, if you're going to download a lot of applications, download a lot of stuff, I would recommend make this very large, as much as you can. It's like the C drive. This is like the C drive in Windows. Okay, this is a very good way to understand it. This root partition for Linux is like the C drive on Windows. Okay, or the root location or folder or drive on Mac. Okay, that one. So we can now, don't forget this. Don't just click on install now. Don't do this first. We need to choose the location of the bootloader. The bootloader reads the information inside boot. So device for bootloader installation, you can read up on that yourself, but what I do know is that when you choose the bootloader installation partition, and you have Windows already installed and you're installing Linux alongside Windows, you always choose the Windows partition. So if Windows was installed on SDC, SDC would be listed here and you would choose SDC. Okay, that would be the safest. If you didn't choose SDC where Windows is installed on and you chose SDA, it wouldn't load Windows as an option to load when you boot up your computer, only Linux. Okay, so to be safe, always choose, if you have Windows, the Windows partition, the hard drive, SDA, not the actual partition where Windows is installed, just the SD. I mean, if Windows was SDC, just the SDC. Okay, in this case there's no Windows installed, it's just on a empty virtual hard drive. It's just Linux that we're installing. So in that case I have to choose SDA. Okay, yes, the boot partition is this one, SD5. But when it comes to the bootloader, usually you want to install it on a partition without the number. Okay, so in this case it's SDA. Anything that I'm doing wrong here, or that you are doing wrong here, it should complain, it should give you a warning or an error message. Okay, right, so let's just go back quickly. So after you chose the correct bootloader, which in your case if you install it on a virtual machine it's going to be this one, SDA, you click on install now. You can read through that, continue. Okay, and then you can choose your location for your time on your Linux and continue. And then this is the part where you would get to much quicker if you had chosen the automatic installation. This would be one of the next screens after that. So that you would skip the whole partitioning, manual partitioning part. Okay, so Ubuntu install student. Ubuntu install student. Okay. You can choose your password. You can choose login automatically, then you don't need to type in your password, or for more security, obviously that one. You can, any names, yeah. This is just going to identify your computer on a network, and this is your actual name, and this is your username. Okay. Continue.